Have you ever wondered when a human being truly dies? Is it when the heart stops, when the brain falls silent, or when the final thought that makes a person who they are disappears? And if every memory, every fear, and every person you ever loved awakened inside another body, would the one who opened those eyes still be you? The year was 4389. Humanity had learned to travel far beyond the solar system, but it had never learned how to make the universe smaller. Every new world still demanded years of a human life. One of those worlds was Eryon, 27 years from Earth. For decades, strange energy fluctuations, geometric heat signatures, and enormous structures visible from orbit had suggested that an advanced civilization was waiting there. A 5-person research team was chosen for the mission. Commander Elias Voss, astrobiologist; Mara Selin, language and cultural specialist; Jonah Reeve, systems engineer Kira Holt, and ship physician Daniel Arlen. Their official task was to reach Eryon, confirm the existence of life, establish communication, and return with scientific knowledge that could safely benefit humanity. But 27 years was not simply a mission duration, it was a large piece taken from a human life. Families would grow older, children would become adults, and familiar cities would change while the crew was gone. Before departure, each crew member signed the same document. It acknowledged one fact with complete clarity: their return to Earth could not be guaranteed in any form. Kira told her 12-year-old son that when she returned, he might look older than she did. He laughed, because to him such a thing still sounded impossible. Elias spent his final night awake, watching the dark side of Earth through an observation window, knowing that the world below would continue without him. Mara recorded no farewell message. To her, saying goodbye into a camera would have meant accepting the possibility that she might never come back. Then the exploration vessel, Horizon, left Earth behind and entered the silent stars until humanity's home became nothing more than a tiny point of light. Most of the 27-year journey passed through long sleep periods, maintenance cycles, and brief rotations of duty aboard the Horizon. Over time, the 5 crew members stopped feeling like colleagues and began to know one another like family.
Handled it better than I would have.
They learned who was afraid, who watched old recordings from Earth when alone, and who played the same familiar song before falling asleep. Messages continued to arrive from home, but the faces inside them changed with every passing year. Children became adults, parents grew old, and the world they remembered slowly moved beyond them. Eventually, some familiar voices stopped arriving at all. The crew began to understand that the true cost of interstellar travel was not distance. It was the fact everything you left behind continued to live without you. Through all those years, the only constant was Eryon, growing slowly larger ahead of the horizon. During the 19th year of the voyage, the ship suffered a sudden system failure. Power disappeared in the medical section,
backup in Sector 4.
and Daniel Arlen was left without life support for several
Hold the line,
minutes.
I'm checking the reactor now.
When emergency power returned, Daniel regained consciousness. The medical systems came back online around him, and the crew rushed to confirm that he was alive. Daniel passed every examination and returned to duty. The incident was closed as one technical failure among hundreds recorded during the long voyage. But after that day, Daniel occasionally spoke of the same strange dream. He could remember no face, no place, and no voice. There was only an endless darkness and the feeling that somewhere inside it, a thought that did not belong to him was waiting. Because he was a physician, Daniel dismissed the experience. as a neurological consequence of oxygen deprivation and tried to forget it. 8 years later, the Horizon finally entered orbit around Eryon. The crew had expected to find silent ruins or abandoned cities beneath them. Instead, Eryon was alive. Illuminated settlements stretched across continents, and enormous bridges hung suspended above the surface. Vast channels of water crossed the land, while countless beings moved through immense cities. After the first landing, the crew's astonishment only deepened. There was no single dominant species on Eryon. Tall, slender beings with skeletal structures walked beside heavily armored bodies. Transparent skinned creatures passed four-armed workers as though such differences were completely ordinary. Some inhabitants appeared almost entirely artificial, while others looked disturbingly similar to human beings. All of them lived together in the same streets. Even stranger, the crew could find no cemeteries anywhere in the cities. Instead, hundreds of thousands of small symbols had been carved into walls and public structures. Each symbol represented not a person, but a body. Some individuals had only one symbol, others had hundreds.
We have to assume that they are.
At first, the humans believed Eryon might simply be a gathering place for species from many different star systems. They were wrong. During their first true contact, the Eryonians did not speak in any language the humans recognized. Within only a few hours, however, they had learned the human language. The being who welcomed the crew appeared young and almost human, yet everything in his manner suggested great age. He introduced himself as Sail and told them, "Do not place too much meaning on the bodies you see here." When Mara asked what he meant, Sail led the humans beneath the city toward a facility where they were about to see something that would change their understanding of death forever. Inside the underground facility, Sail led the human team into a transfer chamber, unlike anything they had ever seen. A dying Eryonian woman lay upon the first crystal-like bed. Her body was old, fragile, and exhausted by pain. On a second bed beside her waited a young, healthy body of an entirely different biological type. When the ancient machine activated, almost nothing seemed to happen. There was no explosion, no violent surge of energy, and no dramatic display of power. The old woman's eyes slowly closed. A few seconds later, the young body on the second bed opened its eyes. The person inside that new body immediately recognized everyone around her. She spoke the names of her children. She described the house where she had lived as a child. Then she looked down at her unfamiliar hands and realized that the pain carried by her dying body was gone. The Eryonians did not describe what had happened as copying. According to them, the information inside the woman's mind had not been duplicated. They believe that consciousness itself had truly moved from one body into another. The human team spent days testing the transferred individual. Memory, personality, emotional responses, traumatic experiences, language patterns, and methods of decision-making had all survived. They met Eryonians who had lived for hundreds of years. Some had changed bodies dozens of times. Others had moved from biological bodies into artificial ones and later returned to biological forms again. Elias called it the greatest discovery in human history. Kira stared at the technology and whispered, "They defeated death." Sail did not answer, because there was another truth the Eryonians had not yet told them. While studying ancient planetary records, Mara began comparing personality evaluations of the same Eryonian individuals across centuries. The differences were almost impossibly small. After a single transfer, the change could barely be detected at all, but after dozens of transfers, the same person no longer made exactly the same decisions. Some childhood memories remained perfectly clear, yet slowly lost their emotional weight. The faces of loved ones stay preserved as information, while the feelings once attached to those faces began to fade. Eventually, Sale admitted that every transfer carried a hidden cost. With each new body, something very small was left behind. No one on Eryon knew exactly what that missing part was. It was not memory, because memories survived. It was not ordinary personality, because most personality traits also remained. The Eryonians called the phenomenon essence erosion.
After repeated transfers.
If someone survived 100 transfers, were they still truly the same person? Perhaps they were. But after 500 transfers, no one could answer with certainty. One of the oldest beings on Eryon was Orin, who had been changing bodies for more than 3,000 years. Orin could no longer remember the species into which he had originally been born. He still knew the names of his first family, but thinking of them produced no feeling at all. He remembered whom he had once loved, yet he could no longer remember why he had loved them. "I did not die," Orin told the humans, "but I stopped living a very long time ago." For the first time since discovering the transfer technology, the crew's excitement turned into fear. Even after hearing Orin's story, Kara refused to dismiss the technology completely. She reminded the others that millions of people on Earth die from disease, aging, and accidents. To Kara, all of those deaths were not abstract numbers. They represented lives that might one day be saved. She argued that the possibility of abuse did not mean the technology should never be used. Jonah disagreed. He believed death was not merely a biological problem to be solved. Jonah imagined rulers who could change bodies and remain in power for generations. He imagined corporate owners whose control could survive every ordinary human lifetime, and he imagined military leaders who might never be forced to surrender authority to anyone who came after them. A world like that, Jonah argued, might not create freedom at all. It might create power that never ended. Elias stepped between the opposing arguments and silenced them both. "We still do not even know what we have found," he said. The room fell quiet because Elias was right. Their investigation continued deeper into the Eryon facility. The records they found became older and stranger, suggesting that the transfer technology predated the civilization using it. At last, Sale led them toward a sealed passage descending far beneath Eryon, where an even greater secret was waiting. Beyond the sealed passage, the crew entered structures buried far beneath Eryon's surface. Sale led them through enormous corridors cut into the planet itself. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that the Eryonians had not invented consciousness transfer. The technology came from structures hundreds of thousands of years older than Eryonian civilization. When the humans reached the central facility, they finally understood the true scale of the machinery. This was no longer a hospital, it was part of a planetary network. At its center was a system capable of transferring not one mind, but billions of minds simultaneously. Where those minds were meant to go remained unknown. Most of the network had never been activated by the Eryonians. Fragments of ancient records revealed something even more surprising. The system had never been designed to create immortality. The civilization that built it had foreseen the death of its own star, it created the network that moved an entire population away from that dying system. To those ancient people, bodies were never permanent destinations. They were temporary harbors. That truth also explained why so many different forms of life lived together on modern Eryon. Over time, Eryon had become a refuge for consciousnesses arriving from civilizations that had already disappeared. Other civilizations had reached the planet while facing extinction of their own. The human crew stood before the network and finally understood what kind of world Eryon truly was. Was this technology immortality, or was it an unimaginably long migration that escaped death while slowly consuming identity? Then Kira discovered a locked Earth protocol hidden inside the Horizon's mission core. The message had been sent 27 years earlier and programmed to unlock only after the vessel reached Eryon. The crew suddenly understood that their mission had never been purely exploratory. Before they had even departed, Earth's governments suspected that Eryon possessed technology resembling consciousness transfer. If that technology proved real, the crew had secretly been ordered to acquire it. They were also instructed to transfer its data to the return vessel and, if possible, bring a functioning example back to Earth. Elias was furious. They did not send us as researchers, he said.
We have no other choice.
They sent us as carriers. But the deception by Earth's governments was no longer the greatest problem. The real question was what would happen if this technology ever reached Earth. Would the wealthy simply keep replacing their bodies forever? Would humans eventually stop having children? Would murder still mean the same thing if a consciousness could survive the death of its body? If a prisoner entered a new body, would the sentence continue? And if people could live for centuries, what would inheritance, family, love, power, and identity even mean? During the argument, Kara opened the last message she had received from the son she had left behind. He had grown into a man who looked older than she did. The mission archive revealed that he had died 3 years after recording that message. For the first time, Kara's voice trembled. If we had found this earlier, maybe he would still be alive. Mara answered her quietly. Maybe, but she would never know whether the one still living was truly him. Kara fell silent as the meaning of Mara's answer settled over her. And behind every argument remained an even more terrifying question. If death disappeared, would being human still mean the same thing? In the middle of the discussion, Sales stopped listening to the others and looked directly at Daniel. He walked toward Daniel and gently took his hand. This is not the first time you have come here, Sales said. Daniel smiled uncertainly. He assumed Sale had made some kind of translation mistake. Instead, Sale led Daniel and the others back to the primary transfer chamber. Daniel stood before the ancient system, while Sale initiated a scan of his neural structure. But when the scan finished, an unfamiliar Eronian symbol appeared. Sale explained that it was a transfer trace. Then Daniel learned the truth. He had actually died 8 years earlier during the accident aboard Horizon. He had not merely lost consciousness for several minutes. His brain activity had completely stopped. At that same moment, the Horizon had been traveling through a strange field originating from Eryon. For years, scientists had assumed the field was nothing more than a natural signal moving through space. At the instant of Daniel's death, Eryon's ancient network detected his neural structure. It pulled his consciousness into an unknown carrier layer. When the Horizon's medical systems restarted his body, That consciousness was connected back into the same physical form. Daniel's body was exactly the same. His memories were exactly the same. He remembered every day he had spent with his friends. But no one could prove that the consciousness he had carried for the last 8 years was the uninterrupted Daniel Arlen who had existed before the accident. Daniel remained silent for a long time. Then he turned toward Mara. "If I died, should not I remember it?" Mara could not answer him. For the first time, the question of consciousness was no longer theoretical. A real human being was standing inside it. Later, Daniel sat alone aboard the Horizon and watched mission recordings made before the accident. On the screen, he saw himself as he had been before that night. The voice was the same, the face was the same, even the smallest habits were the same. Daniel knew with complete certainty that the man in those recordings was him. Yet between that man's final conscious second and Daniel's first remembered moment afterward, there was no bridge he could find. The following day, the 5 crew members gathered for a final decision meeting. Daniel was the last person to speak. "If you take this technology back to Earth, you will use me as proof," he told them. "People will look at me and believe that death has been defeated. But I cannot tell them that is true, because even I cannot prove who I am." In the end, the team decided not to take the consciousness transfer technology back to Earth. They also chose not to destroy the transferable core of the ancient system. They knew they had no right to destroy the legacy of the civilization that did not belong to humanity. Instead, they prepared a transmission containing only Eryon's biological and cultural discoveries. That limited information was sent back toward Earth. All technical knowledge concerning consciousness transfer remained on Eryon. As the Horizon prepared for the return journey, Daniel told the others that he had decided to remain on Eryon. The announcement shocked the entire crew. Elias, Mara, Jonah, and Kira stared at him, trying to understand why he would stay behind. "Do not you want to go back to Earth?" Elias asked. Daniel turned toward the distant lights of the Eryon city. "I do," he answered, "but I do not know which Daniel would be returning." Mara told him the might never find the answer. Daniel nodded. "Maybe that is the point," he said. "Maybe being human is not about knowing the answer. Maybe it is about the choices we make without knowing it." The others boarded the Horizon, while Daniel remained behind. He stood alone on Eryon as the spacecraft lifted away from the surface. The Horizon left the planet and began the long journey home. 27 more years passed as the vessel crossed the darkness between Eryon and Earth. When the Horizon finally returned, most of the people who had once waited for the crew were already dead. The era in which their mission had begun was gone. New generations had been born into a world the crew barely recognized. Humanity gathered to ask what they had found beyond the stars. Elias stepped forward to answer. "We found immortality," he said, "and we chose not to bring it home. The decision was debated on Earth for years. Some people called the crew cowards who had denied humanity its greatest opportunity. Others believed they had protected the human species from an irreversible transformation. Scientists spent years attempting to recreate the principles of Eryon's technology from the limited knowledge that had returned with the crew. But no experiment was enough to reproduce the true transfer system. Years later, an unexpected signal arrived from Eryon. When the transmission opened, the voice belonged to Daniel Arlen. His image appeared on the screen exactly as the others remembered him. Daniel had not visibly aged at all. His voice sounded exactly as it had on the day the horizon left Eryon. To everyone who still remembers me as Daniel, I know the answer now. The transmission fell silent for several seconds. No machine can prove whether a consciousness truly continues, Daniel said. Because what makes a human being human is not only the past they remember, it is whom they choose to protect, it is whom they choose to love, and it is what they are willing to sacrifice for the future. Another silence followed. Then Daniel prepared to speak one final time. If you ever come here, do not come seeking immortality. First learn why you want to live. Then the message ended. Scientists on Earth examined Daniel's recording hundreds of times. During one analysis, they discovered extremely faint voices hidden behind the final part of his transmission. Thousands of different voices were speaking at the same time. The voices did not belong to any species humanity could identify. No one could determine which species had produced them. No one could determine which eras they came from. And no one knew which worlds they had once called home. Yet all of those voices were speaking the same short sentence. We are still here. That discovery changed humanity's understanding of Eryon completely. Eryon was not merely another inhabited planet. It was a living archive, carrying the final memories and consciousnesses of civilizations that had disappeared. Some of those civilizations had lost their worlds long before humanity ever reached the stars. The ancient planetary network had preserved what remained of them. Daniel now lived among those countless surviving memories, one consciousness inside a refuge far larger than anyone on Earth had imagined. He walked through cities filled with bodies from species whose original civilizations no longer existed. Humanity finally understood that escaping biological death did not answer the deeper question of identity. Eryon had survived for thousands of years, yet much of what had once given his memories meaning had slowly disappeared. Daniel's existence proved that a body and its memories could remain, while the continuity of the self could still be impossible to prove. Back on Earth, people looked again at ordinary human life, childhood, age, love, loss, and the generations that replaced one another. They began to understand that limits were part of what gave choices, relationships, and sacrificed their meaning. Earth continued beneath the stars, alive precisely because each generation eventually made room for the next. And far away, Eryon remained among those stars, carrying the final memories of vanished civilizations and reminding humanity that learning how to defeat death was not the same as learning why life mattered.